Happy New Year, everybody. The etymology of the word worship means worth making. I don't know how many people knew that, but all of us are finding time right now, as many of us do in many ways, but here every week, to make worth together, to discern meaning, to weave it together so that it can sustain us through our days and inform our choices. And I want to thank all of you for being here, because this hour is an hour when we make meaning together. Not the only one, but an important one. It's good to be grounded in gratitude in life, and so I want to thank everybody who makes this time possible. Our AV crew, who allows those of you who are in other places to be here also. Our worship team here, our musicians, our soloists, our facilities team who made the building welcoming, our teachers who teach, our children who agreed to come. Everybody. Welcome also, everybody, to October. If you don't already know, the year has a monthly theme for each of our months together. And the theme for this month is deep listening. What is it? How is it part of our lives? How is it a practice that we do that serves this worth-making that we are about? If you have ideas about deep listening, you can share them. We have bulletin boards ready for you in the gallery, and even a question, a fun question this month in our Soul Matters boards. We have times for all of us and ways for all of us to engage. You have an insert in your order of worship this morning, and in your order of worship, there's worship services will touch on aspects of deep listening. You have an opportunity to sit with an image, listen with your eyes in a beautiful guided meditation if you want to access it on YouTube. That was done by Kate Steinberg, our intern, and by Jonathan Silk, our director of communications. We have a poem of the month by our poet in residence, Robert Levette Smith, for you to sit with as you consider it. Some of you will be sitting with it in your small groups this month. To our guests this morning, we invite you to participate in any and all of this or anything that's part of the life of this congregation that interests you or draws you in. I hope you have an order of worship. All of you, those online, also have access to one. There are connection forms if you want to fill them out and hand them in so that we can virtually and in paper if you want to get our weekly online newsletter. And if you need any help navigating this community, this place, I invite you to ask anyone who has an official looking name tag, and they should be able to answer your questions. Welcome. So I want to open this morning our worship with the first stanza of the October poem, For Silences to Sing. Bob writes, October is devoted to deep listening, a sober month when songbirds all fall still, though raucous ravens scold us, as they will, wet light on their dark feathers glistening. Now is the time for silences to sing. Welcome to worship.
Now please join in our unison chalice lighting. The words are in the order of service. And for those watching online, please feel free to find a candle and light along with us. We light this chalice for the light of truth, the warmth of love, and the fire of commitment. We light this symbol of our faith as we gather together. And now you may remember from last month that we are doing the same hymn for the whole month, every month this year, and so now it's October. So please join and rise in body or spirit for hymn 112, Do You Hear? And we will be hearing more of this hymn over the course of the month.
Us to greet one another. If you would, though, please look for someone that you don't already know, even if you have to travel to the back row or across the sanctuary, so we build our commitments and connections to one another. I know you.
As Vanessa mentioned, our theme this month is deep listening, and this story invites us into contemplating that concept a little bit deeper. One day, a villager went to visit a friend who lived in the city. All of the noise of the traffic and the helter-skelter of people running to and fro were very distracting for the villager. The two of them were walking down the street, and suddenly, the villager stopped, tapped his friend on the shoulder, and whispered, "Stand still for a minute. Do you hear what I hear?" The city friend turned to his friend and smiled and said, "All I can hear are cars and horns and buses and traffic and the footsteps of many people. What do you hear?" "There's a cricket somewhere nearby, and I hear it chirping." The city friend stopped and listened very carefully and shook his head, and I said, "I think you're kidding yourself. There are no crickets here. And even if there were, how could you possibly hear them with all the noise on the street? So you still think you can hear the cricket?" "Yes, I do," said the villager. "There is one chirping right now." The villager walked ahead a few steps and then stood beside the brick wall of a house. An ivy vine was climbing up the side of the dwelling. The villager shoved aside a few of its leaves, and surely enough, there sat a cricket, chirping very loudly. And now that the city friend had seen the cricket, he also became aware of the sounds it was making. And as he walked along, the city friend said to the villager, "Naturally, you were better able to hear the cricket. You villagers can hear better than we can." The villager smiled and shook his head. "I don't agree with you. Villagers can't hear any better than city folk can. Now watch, I'll show you." So he reached into his pocket, took out a bunch of coins, dropped them on the pavement, and the metallic sound of the coins had heads turning towards him. The villager picked up the coins and put them back in his pocket, and the two men kept walking. "Do you realize, my friend," said the villager, "that the ring of the coins was no louder than the chirp of the cricket? And still, many city folk heard and turned around. On the other hand, I was the only one who heard the cricket. The reason for that is not that I'm a villager and can hear better than city folk. The reason is that we always hear very well things that we pay attention to." So I ask, what is it you are accustomed to paying attention to? What are you missing out by not listening? And how can you expand that to pick up more of what's around you? Our children and youth will leave and go to their classes during the second verse of the doxology. And today is the parent and guardian group. So if you'd like to attend, then follow the children out and we'll go over to the FOS room. Now is the time in our service to say our covenant, which is printed in our order of service. And we're going to rise for that. Please say the words with me. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help one another.
In my early 20s, I dated a good friend, which was great for a few months. But then we started having increasing tension over issues like how much time we spent together and what we did with that time. She even broke up with me during the first wave of this tension, and I was sad, but also relieved. But then the next day, she changed her mind, and not sure enough of myself, I decided to go along. For the next 6 months, I was ambivalent. We continued to have essentially the same disagreements repeatedly, as many couples do. I could tell that my investment in the relationship was falling, but I cared about her and admired her. We had been very close friends before we dated. I also liked having a partner. She was only my second serious relationship after a long teenage period of feeling like I would never get there. So I avoided the problem. It was usually easy to just keep coasting along. Finally, I started seriously considering ending it. Our simmering tension was boiling over more often, and I also went through a stressful personal situation, which made me realize that when times were hard, I was more drawn to the comforts of my friends than of my girlfriend. And then timing aligned where I had planned a week-long solo vacation, which gave me room to breathe and also to experience what life was like without her. I embraced this opportunity to slow down, to journal, and to take bike rides in nature. As my vacation was nearing the end, there were still thoughts in my head pushing me both ways. What if you break up and regret it? What if you're alone forever? What if you stay and regret it? But with that distance and chance to slow down, I could tell when it really came down to it that breaking up was the right choice. I didn't have more to give that relationship. The most important thing I did, in retrospect, was choosing to really believe myself. I have a strong tendency to second guess and change my mind, but I saw that coming ahead of time. I decided that if I was going to end it, it needed to be a final decision. I knew that getting back together would be a temptation, but not right for either of us. So I stuck to that plan. After my vacation, we had a long, hard talk where I told her my decision and stayed firm to it. Within just a few weeks, I felt completely certain of my decision. With the space and closure that came with the breakup, I could feel that things were better on the other side. I had a few more deeply emotional journaling sessions and was able to process the prior year and articulate lessons from it. I'm so thankful that I found the right conditions for discerning what I really needed, and that once I saw it almost clearly, I pushed myself to be decisive.
Our offering today will be for the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Asheville, North Carolina. Asheville, not Ashland, as it says in your order of service. They have been impacted by Hurricane Helene. Their building was spared in the storm, but they are living in a state of emergency at this time. We send our prayers and offering to them to help them with the damage and to assist members in need.
Having done some deep listening over the summer, we made some changes for this year in the order of service that we're going to live into. And one of them is reflected in a ritual moment that's part of our time of silence in the prayer. I invite us to center ourselves and take a deep breath in and out. Our lives are always in the swirls and eddies of what's going on inside us, mixed with the needs and invitations of those around us, and then the clamor, the joys and the nightmares of the larger world, its daily march. To find our way amidst all these currents is to feel, often without a clear line of sight, our feet in the mud, running over the stones, traversing in this river of life, sometimes the flat, dry places, and sometimes submerged suddenly in the deep holes and forced to swim. Doing as we do whatever the river of life asks of us, what is required to navigate it, in what is the constancy of always some turbulence and change. And so we stand today, each wading into our own confluence. The celebrations and the stuck places. The ways that have opened, some after a long time of waiting for the opening to come. The big questions, whichever ones are before us now, and our invitation to choose a way. All this and more, you and I each are moving through. We come together amidst all of that, and we come also to name together what has washed into our world this last week. We name the rising conflict in the Middle East, the threat of escalated war, the ever longer list of lost lives, 16 pages of children's names in just one comprehensive report. And we hold also the people across the United States who are recovering from Hurricane Helene and other storms too. We name not just the immediate loss of the last week, but the hard realities of the long road to recovery that follows all storms and fires and disasters. And we hold everyone affected. And in the midst of it all, we pray for healing and hope for the best kind of courage, for hearts broken open to moral imagination, to generative solutions. And to finding our own way to ease the tide of human suffering this week, howsoever we can. Knowing that some things are better held in silence because words do not make adequate space or room for them. And given the vast myriad of what we each bring to this hour, I invite us into the silence that makes room for all things. And for you each to let your heart and body and spirit to be and to go where it needs to. And in a world with few places and ways to acknowledge grief, we also, starting this week, invite those who have lost someone they love within the last year to be invited, if you wish to stand or raise your hand during the time of silence to witness to that loss. For what otherwise can go unseen and unnamed, though it so powerfully impacts each day of our lives. And so to make space here to honor it, and each week to hold out the same invitation. And so I invite us into silence.
Our reading is from Frederick Buechner, from The Sacred Journey and Listening to Your Life. It has been edited for inclusivity. There is no chance thing through which the divine cannot speak. Even the walk from the house to the garage that you have walked 10,000 times before, even the moments when you cannot believe there is a divine power who speaks at all, anywhere. The divine speaks, and the words the divine speaks are incarnate in the flesh and blood of ourselves and of our own footsore and sacred journeys. We cannot live our lives constantly looking back, listening back, lest we be turned to pillars of longing and regret. But to live without listening at all is to live deaf to the fullness of the music. Sometimes we avoid listening for fear of what we may hear, sometimes for fear that we may hear nothing at all but the empty rattle of our own feet on the pavement. Be not afraid, says Caliban in Shakespeare's Tempest, of the noises of the night. Nor is he the only one to say it. Be not afraid, says another, for lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. That voice says, I am with you on our journey. The voice says, I've been with you since each of your journeys began. Listen for the divine. Listen to the sweet and bitter airs of your present and your past, for the divine sound.
You might note in the order of service that that piece of music was commissioned by us, and the composer was here this morning. She had to go to another concert, but was with us this morning. And Mark Sumner was supposed to be with us too, although thank you so much, Bill, for leading us. That was beautiful in choir. Mark had a COVID exposure, so we thought it better for him not to be singing and exposing all our beloved choir members to it. But that music is perfect for this morning on so many levels. This week, you might not know it from looking at the sanctuary right now, although you may have noticed some pieces in the gallery that are telltale signs. Our church was filled for multiple days, as it will be again, with people wearing talit and kippah and the sounds of Hebrew prayers and the cantor's voice. Today, those days like today here, there was the sound of the shofar to open and to close, so thank you, Bill Klingelhofer, for that. The wake-up call that the shofar is to a new year, to so much we're supposed to pay attention to in this time, celebrated as it is in Jewish circles with challah and apples dipped in honey as a way to invite in not just a new year, but a sweet one. And perhaps every year that this tradition has been honored, like this year, the world has had some bitterness playing out. And perhaps every year, all the words of aspiration and promise were sung and spoken in unison against a backdrop of a world where sweetness was in jeopardy. And how does that shape our welcoming of a new year? Well, we all know hope is not a strategy. It's choice. I would say it's some days a faith commitment, and one whose only meaningful measure of our commitment is how it shows up in actions, in our behavior, in leaning into real changes that become co-creators of the reality we aspire to see incarnate in our world. So it feels, and I'm sure not accidental, because rich religious traditions develop and deepen over time, and so perfectly appropriate that with the New Year's celebration of Judaism, there also begins a time of reflection and an invitation to personal commitment to change. It is said in Judaism that on Rosh Hashanah, the actions of our past year are written into the book of life, and that includes our sins of omission and commission, our hurtful errors, all the small and large betrayals of our best selves that we have been party to. And they're written into the book of life, and that would be a really depressing way to face a new year, except that we have until the days of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement as it's known, to try and clean up some of our mess, because on that day, the book of life will be irreparably closed. The record sealed for this year. So, we have to get busy. There are these 9 days of the days of awe, as they're called, when you and I can cleanse our conscience and our legacy and turn, there's that beautiful word, teshuvah, turn so that we walk in a new direction into the new year, so that we reorient our lives however we feel we need to live more successfully, better aimed, better equipped, we hope, in heart, in willpower, to make the hopes that we have more possible than before the book of life is closed. This year, ultimately, for all times for us. Atonement, as I understand it, has always been in Judaism not about making it right with others first, Reconciliation with God, it was taught, was what would happen when we made it right with fellow human beings in our relationships. And I like to think also, I think it has to be so, that getting things right with other people, as we all have experienced, almost always means first getting things right in and with ourselves. I don't actually see how you can do one with the other. First, to do this work of writing things and setting a new course, we get clear, the way Daniel described in his reflection, get clear about what we think and what we believe and feel is right for us, and even what is right writ large that inspires and informs our choices. And all of that can be incredibly confusing and conflicted for any number of reasons, which, Daniel, thank you, you also helped point us toward, some of them at least. Because what the world tells us we should think and believe sometimes is confusing and not right with what we seem to feel and know somewhere deep inside, but that can get confusing because our unresolved personal issues can show up and muddy the waters and makes it hard for us to know, because often of our failure to clarify certain fundamental principles, grounding principles about what we believe and know to be true and will anchor our lives in, that will inform all the decisions to follow. All of it adds up to some of the confusion of knowing what to choose or how our choices stack up as we look back and review them. Somewhere in the getting things right between us is the getting things right with ourselves. And somewhere in all of it is the necessity to connect with the deepest part of ourselves and our best selves and what is a sacred knowing in us, however you describe that, by whatever philosophical or theological language, this larger knowing and connection and reconciliation to the best selves. And all of that, I think, has to come back to the practice that we're talking about this month of deep listening. So the story of the cricket and the coins by Ilhamuddin Nukman that Laura told today, this lesson that's for kids, but like the best stories, isn't just for kids. This villager who goes to visit a friend in the city and he hears the cricket somewhere chirping and no one else hears it above the din of the horns and the noises of the street, but the villager follows it, finding the ivy, parting the leaves, and there, in fact, is a cricket singing its song loudly. And when the friend, as you remember, compliments the villager's fine hearing, so sharp that he could hear the cricket, the villager takes some coins from his pocket and drops them on the pavement, and when they land, the heads turn in response on the street around him, and the villager makes his point. Though the tinkling of the coins was no louder than the chirping of the cricket, we all hear the things we are accustomed to paying attention to. You might say the things we choose to pay attention to. Frederick Buechner, the American author and Presbyterian minister, using theological language that was his, appropriate for him, and you can translate it as we all need to, talks about seeing God or hearing God speaking through everything, always, which raises the question for us, why don't we hear all that more often? Or how do we hear it more often? How do you and I, with everything we have to balance and juggle in our lives, how do we train ourselves to hear what is most important, speaking to us from the world and from deep inside? Daniel offered a sense of some of what helps him Maybe some of it rings true for some of you. Time to slow down, time apart, especially when in the midst of a big decision, especially when feelings are strong and even contradictory. Time apart to slow down. Journaling, for him, it was biking. I think often for many of us, it's some practice that pulls us back into our body. That beautiful word, member, that means the pieces of our body remembering, reconnecting to our bodies and what they also have to tell us about what we're feeling and knowing. Maybe what he had, this ability to be someplace unfettered, not reminded by who he had chosen to be in the past, but with space to listen for who he was being asked to choose going forward. Frederick Buechner says the hearing, though, can happen anywhere, that we don't need to go far away or to any special place to hear what we need to hear. What we do need, he says, remember, it speaks even in the walk from the house to the garage that you have walked 10,000 times before. And I think that's true, too. It can be, we all know moments when we have an unsuspecting insight or clarification dropped on us in the midst of routine and familiar surroundings and even busyness. In fact, actually, I remember once I went to walk my dog in the morning, like I did every morning, and I was crossing the street, and I was filled in my head with the to-do list of the day that I was already sort of streaming through, and so not really paying attention to a lot, except that in the crosswalk, and because red lights are only suggestions in San Francisco, in the crosswalk, there was this car racing, even though the light was already red, racing up in from the simple block before to the crosswalk. And I was so jerked out of my own reality that I jumped back appropriately to the midway of the street of Guerrero and yanked my poor mini poodle. Unfortunately, we started putting her in body things after that, because that was not a good moment for her or me. And the person did, in fact, slam on the brakes at the red light, which was red when they started from the previous block. And it hit me in that moment as I said to my God, you're racing to the red light? And then it hit me. What a great metaphor it was, myself included. Right? That senseless hurry that served no purpose at all, just caught in the rush of it all, addicted to it sometimes even, it seems like, and the danger, the secondary effects, and the uselessness of living that way. This metaphor and this caution. Right in the middle of a day walking the dog. We can hear wisdom and invitations to reorient our lives. We can hear and find clarity anywhere. What seems to be important, though, is that, like the villager taught his friend, we increasingly train ourselves to listen for all of that. Because, like every skill, we get better at it the more we practice. And the consequences of this one are pretty important to us, that listening, what it does for us. Because the fact is that our lives need a lot of small course corrects, right? I mean, sometimes we get the big ones. Sometimes we do this 180-degree pivot. We get sober, or we go for marriage counseling, or we quit one job and we change professions because we know we're miserable or called to do something else. But more often, I think you and I are more like the plane that is on autopilot, which I have heard is off course 95% of the time. But just by a little, and so constantly course correcting, so it gets to the destination it wants to get to. And those little adjustments are what deep listening makes possible daily for us if we find the ways for us that work to do it. Just little adjustments. I need to be kinder today to my spouse. I need to be less defensive at work. I need to be more generous with the resources I have. I need to be more open to laughter. I need to take better care of my body. I need to prioritize friendship. And all of that will show up in these daily choices that are just different enough to get our lives back on course. That beautiful word, teshuvah, turning. So we stay on course. Because course correcting once a year, if that's what we do, if we even do that, means we may have a lot of work to do, erasing things or correcting things in the book of life, if we can even do it at that point. And skip a year, and oh my goodness, people, we may end up in Istanbul, though we meant to be in Australia, and we're talking about our lives. So, we all know also, I think this is an important moment and an appropriate moment to name what we all see, right? Which is that we also all know, not just in our lives, but we know in the world what it looks like when things have gone drastically off course. I mean, we know in a lot of ways. But this week in particular, I'm sure I'm not the only one who's aware of the fact that we're stepping into the 1-year anniversary of the horrific events of October 7th and the days after, and the violence in Israel and Gaza and the West Bank and now Lebanon and Iran and all over the region, and that we're stepping into a year of what? Hatred and demonization and violence and dehumanization and so much else can do. And we will, in the weeks ahead, as a nation and as individuals in our own way, commemorate people and places with scars that will never fully heal, and all of it started a year ago. And I don't know enough about the politics or the long history of relationships and failures of a moral imagination in all the places that they happened, or the political mistakes and the arrogance and the ignorance that contributed to all of it. I don't. But I do know as a religious person that when evil is done, always, it is done by individuals or authorized by individuals who lose touch with some deep wisdom that we all have access to, that knows a better way, even if the choice would have been hard, especially when we are brokenhearted and angry and afraid. And there have been lots of those choices. People who forgot that if you kill and starve and rape in the name of a faith, you have betrayed everything worthy of that faith and of any faith that is worthy of you. Who forgot that we will be judged by how we treated the vulnerable, and especially by how we treated the children. That we must choose our enemies carefully, as my minister growing up used to say, choose our enemies carefully, for we will become like them. Who forgot that old Yiddish phrase, and maybe there's one in Arabic too, that reminds us that when you go out for revenge, you have to dig 2 graves. Evil that happens when we forget what it means to listen deeply and to live into what we hear when we do, and the dangers of getting unanchored from that place in our own lives intimately and in all we have to own together, because we do own it all. So each year, there is this ritual time in Judaism, so gorgeous, so thoughtful, when it asks its people to reflect on what's written in the book of life, what they wrote in the book of life, what each of us did, and to pray and to shed worldly things and to get back as one in relationship and connection to each other and to ourselves, and to clean up our mess and to turn as we needed to by a degree, by 180 degrees while we can, for our own sake and for the world's sake, and because of everything we hold dear and sacred, to listen. Judith Stoddard's daughter, Susanna, Judith, I hope I have your permission to share this, lived in Asheville for more than 20 years and was affected by the hurricane, and sent a lengthy account of what happened. And the way she signed her email and the last words of her account feel so relevant to this Sunday's service, and so I close sharing them. She writes, Shana Tova, in hopes that out of all the sadness and hurt of this last year, for all those who have suffered and are suffering, a good new year may arise. May we make it so. May it be so. Amen. We have a closing hymn to sing, hymn number 219. It's in your gray hymnals. Oh, hear my people. I invite you to rise in body and spirit as we sing it together.
This hour of worship is nearly complete, but the work of making meaning continues. Connection is part of how we make meaning.
Hi, everyone. Just a quick announcement. If you are new to UUSF, you are invited to attend the newcomer orientation, which is taking place in the Martin Luther King room today at 12:30 p.m. after service. It's a great chance to learn more about our church or Unitarian Universalism and to ask any questions that you have. I'll be waiting in the gallery outside the sanctuary to help you find the meeting, and we'll also have childcare available if you need it. So just come find me, and we hope to see you soon.
And we have another opportunity to make both connection and build community and have a good time and raise money for our annual program and work here. That will happen at our annual auction on October 20th. Information about how to buy tickets and details are in your order of service. The silent auction bidding has already begun. Our live auctioneer, Gary Lorenzen, is here too to make sure that you're all prepared for the day.
I do a lot less preparation than you do, and I got a lot of applause. It's just not fair. I just want to make sure, like, we talked a lot today about darkness around this earth, including I lost a friend and a friend's mother in Asheville also. I come here because it just makes me happy that this building is filled with love, and I want to make sure that we continue to keep these doors open. So I have a place to go, and all of you have a place to go to feel this love. I sit in this chair and I look at this light coming through here that I absolutely love, and I think of my father saying, you know, shutting off a light in a room, like, just use God's light. So every time I see that light, I think of my father, who I love very much. And I can guarantee you we are going to have so much fun in 2 weeks. We're going to have raffles. We're going to have a live auction where I talk really fast. Don't worry about it. I can talk really fast. I'll slow it down if I need to. Don't worry about it. I'll keep the numbers at the speed I have to for everybody to understand. But we're going to get those paddles up. Start working on your shoulders now so you can raise that paddle, right? I'll do the easy part and just point at your bids. Very, very simple. The live auction is already happening online. The link is in the service here. Click on that and go to it and start doing your bids. Let's all keep the love going in this building. Thank you. I love you.
Please consider joining members after service, discussing and trying to understand ballot measures. UUSF does not tell people how to vote, but we can help one another with information that helps us individually decide how our values are best served by our votes on measures in November. And put on your calendar the events, the powerful programs coming up next week after service, and stay for social hour today after service. And thank you for being here today.
And now we're going to extinguish our chalice, but take the flame of community and the power of this shared hour into the week ahead. And it's hard to snuff out. Are you listening? And let's rise and join hands as we say our benediction, or just reach out, and if you don't want to have someone hold your hand for whatever reason, you're immunocompromised, it's not good for you, just cross your hands across your chest. Here, Meg, you can come forward. Oh, no, you're reaching to Sherry. Oh, all right. It's like a game of Twister in church. And now, in our comings and our goings, may the light of love shine upon us. Out from within us, be gracious unto us and grant us peace. For this is the day we are given. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Amen.
In our service.